this March 6th, 2019 meeting of the Oyster River Cooperative School Board will come to order. Just a couple things before we get started with the strategic plan. This will be the last meeting that Patty Anderson will be attending, and I would just like to say, Patty, that you've been a wonderful representative. We've enjoyed your humor, your insights into school, your active participation on the board. You've done the faculty neighborhood proud. And we just, we know that it's been a busy time for you with musicals, and your wonderful hockey team, which had a terrific season. And now you have another musical coming up, so it's just, we're so pleased that we were part of the mix of your activities, and you certainly contributed a lot to the board. So we have this gift for you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I've had a blast.
So have you made a decision for college yet, or are you still in the deciding stages? Or
I'm still where I was a month ago. I've only heard back from 3. I've been accepted to all 3, but I've only heard back from 3 out of the 8. So we're still waiting and crossing our fingers.
Yeah. Wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
And if we could have just another slightly out of order in terms of the agenda. Dean wanted to speak, and he'd rather speak now than to wait for an hour because he has some work, places to go, people to see. So is that all right?
My daughter just got back from math team, and I have to take her home. Thanks for accommodating me here. I just wanted to remind everybody out there that Election Day is Tuesday the 12th, which is 6 days from now. Hope to see everybody at the polls. Tom and Kenny are running for 2 seats, so unfortunately I think they're going to win and sentenced to 3 more years of hard labor. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And good luck with the district on all their questions.
Thank you, Dean. So now we'll move to the strategic plan schedule, beginning with equity and inclusion.
Yeah, so I'll start and then introduce Bruce. Can you? Oh, there we go.
Is that on?
Is it on? Can you hear me? Okay. The equity inclusion goal we have been working, or the equity inclusion goals, there are 4 of them. We've been working very actively with New Hampshire Listens, and Bruce Mallory is here from New Hampshire Listens to kind of talk about that. We have 4 broad goals. One is dealing with looking at our K-12 curriculum sequence, which we have already begun doing. I'll let Bruce talk a little bit about how New Hampshire Listens has been assisting us with that. We also have the equity and inclusive school climate, and trying to improve school climate around that, and that's a 5-year goal. We have looking at extracurricular and co-curricular activities and trying to make those more equitable and inclusive, and then also the continued goal of engaging family and community. We've had some great community dialogues around topics related to diversity and equity and inclusion, and we want to continue that dialogue because we think that's really key to a productive relationship we have with the community. Bruce, would you like to talk a little bit about the role that New Hampshire Listens are playing in those?
I'll be happy to. Good evening. Thanks for having me come spend a little bit of time with you. I believe deeply in this work and its importance, and I really appreciate Dr. Morrison and Todd Allen's leadership over the past more than a year, really. I'm sure that you all are quite aware that this is a terribly important topic for our community, our state, and our nation right now. There are individual incidents that occur that spark people's attention to the challenges of equity and inclusion. Durham is not immune from those kinds of incidents. As you know, neither are your neighboring communities, whether it's Dover, Newmarket, or other places. I'm happy to say a little bit about New Hampshire Listens if there are questions. We're part of the Carsey School of Public Policy at UNH. We've been around for about 9 years working in communities, helping communities have conversations around difficult challenges that they face, where people kind of dig in and get polarized or have a hard time listening to each other or hearing each other. And we provide support for problem solving in communities that can help communities get unstuck and move forward. I'll have to say that in the past several years, a lot of our work has been in school districts. across the state of New Hampshire, in Claremont, in Dover, in Berlin, most recently in the Gorham area. I'll be up there again on Monday. And that's, I think, partly because, as you all know better than anybody else, all of you people who have a blast sitting on the school board, as your student representative said, communities can get stuck and polarized, frankly, around public school issues, whether it's funding or curriculum or hiring and firing or facilities. There's an infinite number of possibilities. And in the last couple of years, New Hampshire Listens has been called upon increasingly to help communities address issues directly related to equity and inclusion, specifically around issues of racial equity and acts of harassment or bias directed at people of color in those communities. And New Hampshire is on the learning curve in terms of how to make sure we're a welcoming state and that all of our communities are comfortable places for people no matter what their social identities are. I'm happy to sort of address the specifics of this plan that we were asked to help draft and provide to the district and to the school board. So I'll just say one or two more sort of general comments about how we come at this work. Let me say a little bit about what we think about when we think about equity, because that's a pretty large term and could be ambiguous. We think about it several ways. One is equity of opportunity. We want to be sure that, particularly a public school system, provides opportunity to all of the students, regardless of their abilities, their identities, their backgrounds, how long they've lived in the community, their age, their gender. We want to be sure that there are no barriers to every student enjoying the resources that the school district offers. And I'm sure that that sort of core value is shared by everybody here. We've had the opportunity to meet with all of your staff over the last couple of months. It's been quite a process. We've met with all of the instructional staff in all of the schools in the district. We've met with your bus drivers, your food service workers, your custodians, your IT folks, in a variety of different settings and meetings. But we've had opportunities to meet face-to-face with every one of those folks to talk about what their roles and responsibilities are to assure that the school district provides a climate that is welcoming, an experience, an educational experience, and a social experience where everybody feels like they belong to the school system and to the community. And I've said this to Todd and to Dr. Morse, that I'm really impressed by the tenor of the staff when they come together, who, whatever their roles are, whatever schools they work in, they come into these conversations with a real openness to the conversation. Nobody's avoiding what can be sometimes kind of a difficult or sensitive, conversation. So there's fertile ground here for us to work in. We also think about equity in terms of multiple pathways to success. There can't be just a single way for a student to succeed here, regardless of what that student's identity might happen to be, or whether it's has to do with gender or socioeconomic status or minority status, ethnicity, racial identity, and so on. So part of our work here and in this draft that we've presented and our interactions with the administration and the staff, we're always asking about, are there lots of different ways that students can feel like they belong and they have opportunities for success here. We think about access, which is related, of course, to multiple pathways and opportunity. Does every student here have access to the same kinds of resources, the same level of resources, the same quality of resources? That's an equity set of questions as well. We think about equity across the spectrum of differences in human beings. So regardless of social identity, we want all students here to succeed, and we're not going to be blind to social identity. So this is a paradox, and one I think that our society is grappling with right now, because I would say that 10 to 15 years ago, a lot of us would have said, well, I'm colorblind. I'm immune to differences related to racial or ethnic identity or first language or religious attire or whatever it might be. I'm above that. I'm beyond that. And I think that what we've learned in our society in the last decade or so, sometimes the hard way, is that to be blind to those differences does not serve people that don't look like most of us in this room well all the time. We need to attend to differences that make a difference, whether it's social class or sexual orientation or racial identity, religious beliefs, whatever it might be. So that's kind of sometimes sort of a paradox almost, in which we want to attend to all the differences in students here, and particularly those differences that can be associated with barriers to opportunity and access. Having said that, the last thing I'll say about equity is that we do in New Hampshire Listens and in our work with the district, we do begin with racial identity because that's foundational, and it's where, frankly, we, meaning our society in general, and we might even say our own community, and I can say the university I've been at for 40 years, is the clumsiest, to use a technical term. It's where we're still grappling with how best to be sure that everybody feels that they belong, that they count, that nobody is subjected to verbal harassment or physical harassment or bullying because of their racial identity. This is a starting point for us. I think we're convinced that if we can help ourselves, our staff, our colleagues, our students do well by welcoming students of color, staff of color, parents and residents in the community with diverse racial and ethnic identities, then the principles that we practice in that process can also be applied to students, parents, staff with other kinds of identities as well, besides mainstream European white, sometimes male identities. So that's a little bit about how we think about equity, and I think those values, those principles are reflected in our focus here on curriculum, school climate, curricular and co-curricular activities, and the relationship between families and the school itself. So I'll stop there and be happy to answer questions.
If I could just add, most recently, we were just talking about the dialogues that New Hampshire Listens has facilitated with all the staff of the district. And what they are doing is trying to be very responsive to what staff needs are. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So what these most recent dialogues were really geared towards presenting scenarios of situations that staff might find themselves in, and how might you respond to those things in those kind of situations. And so obviously the kinds of situations that, say, a classroom teacher might experience are different than what a bus driver might experience, are different than what a cafeteria worker might experience, but nonetheless they're all interacting, and it's important that we have a sense of understanding and consistency in how we conduct ourselves. So it is a very comprehensive process, but I can say that early indications are our school staff is very invested in it. In fact, there's a course this summer that we're just getting off the ground, which some early indications are a lot of interest in on equity and inclusion in the classroom. Partnering with UNH, we have a great arrangement where we have a UNH tuition waiver program, and our staff will have the opportunity to take a class for graduate credit, looking at how that plays out in the classroom. So it's really important that we're trying to be very responsive to where we need to go. And it was a challenge to map out 5 years in that vein, because it's where you want to get in 5 years, but how you get there, you don't want to assume everybody's the exact same place. You want to bring them along as they're ready, and I think that's one of the advantages we have to working with New Hampshire Listens.
Great. Questions from the board?
I'll just do one comment. Reading through your packet of the New Hampshire Listens thing, it's a paradox, because you're preparing yourself for a situation, and you never think that you're preparing yourself for something like that. But I thought it was really great, because one of the things that always happens is an incident occurs, and then you walk away, and then you're thinking in your mind, or replaying it in your mind, how could I have done better? And I think that the training really does set you up, that when you're in the most difficult situation, that it becomes almost like a muscle memory, that you can respond better to it. And I think that I think it's a great thing.
You're referring specifically, we're providing very simple scripts to the staff.
Yeah.
That you can literally, sort of metaphorically at least, pull out of your pocket when you're in the hallway and you hear something said,
Yeah.
or you witness something, and so you know, all I need to say is that's not okay, or why did you do that, or why did you say that, or what do you think that means? So just a few of those kinds that interrupt that moment and give a signal to the folks that are involved that it's not okay, and that they need to stop and think about it.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that what happens again is like when you're not prepared for it and you walk away, it almost condones the incident.
Of course, of course.
And so it just is a great thing to be prepared.
Silence is consent.
I had a question about diversifying staff, because I think that's been a real difficulty here, and we're in a situation where, because of our salary scale and because of the attractiveness of teaching here, we can just put out an announcement of a job and get wonderful applicants and continue to be what we've been, but we won't draw applicants of color, or we won't diversify our staff if we do that continuously. So I'm just curious, because you had this experience at UNH, what your guidance for us would be to kind of break out of where we are in terms of hiring?
Well, I'm not a hiring expert or an HR personnel expert, but it seemed, and given my experience at UNH and the hats that I've worn there, the first question that I'd ask is this a place that a person who would want to come who doesn't see themselves in the rest of the staff? I mean, that's one way to frame it. And so if I were to see the attractive environment here and decide to apply here, and I was a person of color, I'd also want to ask, first of all, is there anybody else there like me? Will I feel like I'm a part of a larger community? And secondly, what is the district going to do to make sure that I feel welcome and I feel like I belong too? So show me evidence that you're not just hiring people so you can brag about it or so you can count noses and count the colors of those noses. Show me evidence that you're genuinely trying to move towards a more inclusive, a more equitable, a more welcoming school system. And I think this part of the strategic plan is one piece of evidence. So I would tout in that recruitment process the steps that you've taken over the past year and a half, because those candidates may also see that, oh, Oyster River, oh, I remember, I read about that in the press. What did I do? Oh, right, that story. Oh, do I want to go there? So what's the evidence that the district responded proactively and positively to whether it was the school bus incident or any other incidents that have come along? And that is going to go a long way for you in terms of recruitment. Working with agencies, programs, institutions of higher education that are graduating significant numbers of new teachers of color, working with the IRT based in Massachusetts, which specifically is kind of a pipeline for college students of color who want to go into the teaching profession, supports them in summer programming, helps them with the job search, helps them think about what does it mean to be a teacher in a predominantly white school district when I'm one of the only ones of my own identity. So there are resources out there that contribute to that, what I call the pipeline.
And we have made contact with IRT, which stands for International Recruitment of Teachers, is that
Right,
correct?
right.
Yeah, and they have a social...
Institute
Thank you, Institute for Recruitment of Teachers.
Is that at Andover? Or?
Yeah,
It's in Andover, yeah, and they have a whole
Kelly
network.
Wise, right? Kelly Wise?
yes.
Yep.
But they have a network of thousands of people of color who are coming through education training programs across the country, and we're gonna advertise all of our positions through that. So that is one thing we can do. And if I could also add, one of the things that Bruce just said, I had a conversation with a non-Oyster River community member yesterday, a person calling me to find out more information about our school system because they were thinking of moving to the area. And one of the things that they had done was they'd done a Google search and they had seen the article in the paper about the incident that occurred last fall on the bus, but then they had also recognized that there'd been an awful lot of stuff done in a very responsive way. And I didn't ask if this person was of color. I have no knowledge of that. But the fact is somebody from outside our community sees that and recognizes that, and I suspect that's true.
Yeah, in addition to that, we had outreach from a Maine city, not one that I've worked for, and they wanted access to the new policy that we adopted, and they asked when the board was ready to release this to the public that they could have a copy of our strategic plan around diversity and inclusion, because they're also interested in this topic. So it's just like our transgender policy, it's starting to germinate in other locations. Thank you very much, Bruce.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Come, Bruce.
Thanks for your
Please
interest.
share with the team how much we appreciate working.
Well, I look forward to
with
coming back
graduations.
every now and then and giving you a progress report.
Good to see you again.
Thanks, Tom. Good
Yeah.
to see you. I'll hang out for a few minutes to get it. Hear some of the rest of you come up.
Came to
Stay as long as you
UNH.
Oh, really?
Yeah, pretty much, right?
What's that?
We came to UNH at the same time, so,
Yeah. That's why we look so young.
yeah, that's right.
So Todd, why don't you pick it up on world language?
Yes. Well, world language is one that obviously you, as a board, have spoken quite a bit about this year. Had a group of parents that came forward earlier in the year, kind of challenging us to really begin thinking, which we had, by the way, already begun doing, to really look at that whole K-12 world language concept. So clearly our goal in the strategic plan, big picture, is to have a K-12 world language program. We already have the committee in place that has begun doing the work of trying to develop recommendations which will be being presented to the board in the fall. And so obviously those recommendations will be for you to hear at that time. I also would point out, thank you for approving the sabbatical leave for Leslie Ayers at the last meeting, and she is, her focus is on trying to take that plan and help us really build it out and take a look at what it means to us as a whole district and really flesh out things. Obviously, the goal is to take a look at what our best practices in world language instruction and then look for how we best can fit that into we already have it at the middle school, but at the K-4 level. Clearly, it's going to mean a lot of visits to other schools, a lot of research, but obviously, making that recommendation is the first step, and then really it's looking at logistics of how we make this happen over the course of the next 5 years. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're trying to do with world language. Happy to answer any questions.
Well, just, I guess a concern that I have is the beginning implementation is in the 21-22 school year, which is the same, if in fact the bond is approved, it's the same year that, you know, that first big chunk of money. And so I'm just concerned about
Timing.
the timing of it, and I'm just concerned with saying begin implementation without, because we are still in the exploration part of it. So, you know, explore the, I don't know, I'm a little bit hesitant to kind of commit, I guess, to say that we're going to implement it in that school year. To me, we may discover we can start to implement, or we may find that we have to put it off another year or two. So I don't know how anyone else feels about that, but I know I have that concern.
I have the same concern, because I think it seems to be you're jumping, there's a decision to be made by the board that whether to go forward with the K-4 foreign language. I don't think we've decided, unless I'm wrong, I don't think we've decided that we are going to go forward with that. We've decided we're going to gather information on that.
Right.
And then I think there, like, as I would understand, I don't know what the financial implications of this are, but I would bet it's at least 2 teachers at each school. So you're talking about 4 positions. If you count the 5th grade teacher, that's 5, you know. So it's a really substantial
It could be, yes.
commitment, depending on how intensive.
Well, yeah,
So there's
depending.
a whole lot to be decided yet. And so I think to say we're going to implement it in the 3rd year when we haven't decided that we're going to implement it, I think the language has to be changed, conditional to board approval or something like that.
Yep, that will absolutely do that. I would say that, I mean, clearly the goal of the strategic plan is to, in this case, is to look at the K-12 world language model. Everything in between are simply action steps that can change along the way. And I would agree, we don't know what the financial implications are. I mean, clearly if we decided, and I'm not suggesting we do, a full immersion program, that's a much different cost impact than a program that is basically an experiential program where kids, like I was visiting over in Rye last month, and they had a program. It was a wonderful program, but it was basically once a week for all kids, and one teacher was able to do that. So clearly, the range of what that might look like can be very different. It also can depend on whether it, having a K-12 program doesn't necessarily mean it happens within the school day. It could be a school-sponsored program outside of the school day. A lot of schools are doing that as well. So there are lots of variables, yeah. Ken?
So, and I think to your point, Todd, I think I read it very differently than Tom and Denise read it, in that I saw in the 2020-21, we begin to discuss what we would like to see at K through 4, and that doesn't mean we're going full board with just immersion language. And then in 2021-22, we adopt that. So I think the decision point still remains open, but what this does is we talk about in 2020-21 what we would like to see in elementary school, and that could be just a smattering. That might be what we decide we want, and that's the implementation. But to me, it gives us the roadmap whereby it puts us on target to be looking at that. So that's how I took it.
Well, I mean, then the question is, if it's just a smattering, is it something we want to do,
Well, and I think that's what we're going to talk about in 2020, 2021 is what we want to do.
Yeah. So given the differences in how we've read it, and given the visibility of this particular issue, I think that a lot more nuance needs to go into that. I mean, I agree with your interpretation that, our understanding that these are subject to change down the road, but the way I think this reads right now is fairly definitive. And if I were not part of this process and down the road this changed, I would kind of feel like the rug got pulled out from under me.
I can see that, for sure.
Yeah, I'm even like, because it reads implementation of fifth grade world languages in 2021, that means come October, we're budgeting for that position or whatever. We've already decided, there's a lot hanging. We were like, the schedule and all that is to be determined, so, the change I would make is give yourself some out, like, investigate, or like, something that that we aren't firmly implementing, but we're, whatever, if possible, or whatever.
And on that one, specifically on the fifth grade, I don't think that fits with where the middle school master schedule is going to be rethought. I think that's later in the strat plan.
And actually, all of that kind of conversation is part of the whole planning process. There's no question that master schedule is a huge component. The committee that's looking at this, Carrie, David, and Jay are all actively involved in it. And I do think there's, as I think Al did a nice job of talking about looking at the barriers and the potential obstacles to how would you go about implementing it. And we have to be really honest with ourselves about what can be done. I mean, I guess when I was drafting the plan, begin implementation of the plan, we don't know what the plan is yet. So the plan could be, to not do it. We haven't made that decision yet. But so the plan could be, we start with, a kindergarten program. We just gradually work our way up until it's all grade levels. In fact, I was talking to a gentleman at in the Wayland school system down in Massachusetts, and they went through this process 3 years ago, and they are just this year at the point of starting a program at one of their elementary schools. So it's taken them 3 years, even after making the plan, to actually get to the point where there's a staffing position and it's actually happening.
I mean, it's kind of, because the other thing is we've approved a sabbatical that's really going to begin to investigate it, and there won't be enough time for the person on the sabbatical to actually do anything before we actually make a decision. It's like we're kind of ahead of ourselves.
The sabbatical almost is the first year of the strat plan.
Isn't it? It's like, so it's like.
Yeah, so I think we just need to slow it down, I think, a little bit, or.
Well, I do think, and please don't take this as a criticism, but the committee that was formed sort of put the issue in the forefront and kind of is pushing us to make decisions by September that we when we drafted the plan, would have been spread out over a longer period of time. So there is an interest in us saying, well, if we're going to do a K-4 program, what would it look like? So we're supposed to make a recommendation by September. So it does expedite the timeline on that. So I would completely agree that Leslie Ayer's sabbatical would be more helpful to us if the entire year was spent investigating that. That being said, our goal is to give you a recommendation in the fall, and then what her intent is to take that recommendation and to flesh it out and help us really actually develop the program that.
But all I would say to that is that we're not definitively saying in the fall you have to have this plan done. You can come to us and say, we're not ready to have this plan done. We really want to integrate what she's doing. I just don't want to have an artificial sense of you have to get this done by September, and we have to implement this. It's like, if you're not ready, we're not ready.
This is really an important concept, because the way the wording of the charge is did imply to us that we had a deliverable in the fall, spring and fall.
Well, we need to know where we are.
Right, that's
where the committee is in September, if anything is going to happen in 2021, right? From a budget perspective. No, maybe it's not the whole thing, maybe it's a piece of it, but we need to know something in September, or nothing is happening in 2021.
Yeah, that's why I just stopped for a second, because this is super important for our work and how fast we push and pull, because really what drove this timeline was based on that charge that you gave us. We thought, oh my goodness, because before that we were much more taking it over time, because we knew it was a much bigger time issue. So as you're articulating this, you're actually now giving us permission to go slower, where both Todd and I had the signal that we should be going fast. And so this is really helpful.
I mean, again, I agree with what Michael is saying. We need to know something in the fall, but that something very well could be that we're not.
We still have a lot of work to do.
We still got a lot of work to do.
Okay.
And I think that's exactly what you were asking, right?
Although I do think that it's important to slow down and really flesh out this whole thing, I think it's been made pretty clear to us that the public really wants to speed it up and implement it as fast as it can go. So that it's kind of hard to mesh that together, but I don't think that we should totally kind of put it on the back burner. I think it's something that we really need to work on.
I guess I was working on the assumption that the makeup of the committee was people both in the community and the district that are interested in moving quicker rather than slower, and that there would be that kind of intrinsic motivation.
It is.
And I think there is, absolutely, yeah. The committee is everybody on the committee, including all the school people, are very committed to the idea of we want to figure this out and have a good proposal that we can bring to you. But it does help to know that we don't necessarily have to have a fully fleshed out plan by September. I mean, when I initially began drafting this, we were thinking, and in fact, it's what the language people expressed to you last year, was the idea we wanted to solidify that middle school, high school program first, and then turn our attentions to the K-4. And I think that's where we were. And now this does accelerate that. So I'd be happy to go back and kind of tweak it.
We got really good guidance tonight. Thank you, guys. That was very helpful. Nuance is the key.
Any comments about foreign language?
I think the one thing that I would add, just because we did it on all the other academic pieces, is the fifth year should be a student outcome, like we did. We made those modifications based on previous board comment. All right.
So mental health is next, right?
Where is them?
Are we doing curriculum leadership?
Do you guys have the mental health plan?
Oh, mental health is next.
It's in there.
Okay. I don't have it at mine.
No.
Heather, you're on.
So the mental health goal for the district really is kind of pulling together the three levels of MTSS work that each level is going to be doing. So it's really kind of district level oversight to make sure that those processes are in place. In particular, focusing on some screening tools that we would use for a variety of things, depression, anxiety, et cetera.
really looking at our data collection and how we're analyzing that, and also utilizing the SHAPE assessment to see where we are in terms of our growth from our baseline data that we collected last year. And really the main goal is to be much more proactive versus reactive. Currently, we are kind of putting out the fires after they've been burning, and we'd love to kind of get a head start on that. So a focus really is kind of spreading the SEL programming, though it might look different at each level, throughout each of the levels. So we've talked a little bit about Open Circle potentially being at the elementary level. That probably is not going to happen at the middle school and high school, but there will be evidence-based programming at those levels. And I think that's kind of the brief overview.
Questions from the board?
That's good.
And this seems very, I mean, we had the presentations before. This seems very just absolutely consistent with what we've heard, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think at the district level, it's a little bit harder to do. You have to be in the buildings to work with the students and to develop the MTSS system. But it is important to have consistency through the K-12 system, so I think that's going to be useful. And we have talked about having a district-level team just to look at what kind of data we're looking at district-wide, just to ensure that we're kind of implementing the programming that's going to be most effective for our students.
Questions?
Michael?
I don't know what exactly I'm thinking of, but it seems like there's more that we're trying to do here than specifically MTSS. I think there's an outcome that we're looking for around reduction of stress amongst both students and teachers, and I don't know if there's a more general measure of mental health wellness. I guess I feel like this is very programmatic focused, but is there something else beyond that we should be thinking about as well? And I'm sorry, I don't have anything more specific to that besides a sense or a feeling.
So, Michael, if I can take a shot at that. So, in order to put together a comprehensive K through 12 program for the first time, it does take on that programmatic feel. I think that where it will feel less programmatic is when, like most recently, our students put on a mental health evening. So the activities that are embedded in this process make it more human. And then decisions that the board has made in support of the high school relating to the schedule, as Patty's alluded to, living through it, has made a big difference in students' lives. The late start, we've had feedback from parents that it's making a big difference in their lives. So even though this feels, it may feel maybe too clinical, I think the reality, the implementation, and how we're doing it is the human piece, and I think that might be what you're alluding to. How do we get that human element into this, and it's engaging the students and the staff in a meaningful way. So, when we had Dr. Ryan here, and he went through the whole, this is how we're doing the assessment, that too is clinical, but then it's how do you interpret that data in a way that makes it meaningful to students and staff. So I think on paper it does come across as clinical, but I think in reality when it's being implemented in a very human way. I don't know if that is coming close to where you're trying to grab onto.
I also think MTSS is, this is really succinct, so it's kind of a brief overview. If we were to list all the things that were to come from that, it might be what you're looking for. So MTSS is useful in terms of identifying trends, looking at data, YRBS data. So things like having Haven come into the middle school and trying to expand that to the high school to talk about dating violence, things like that that are very student-specific and addressing very specific needs like stress and anxiety, and those things are going to come from MTSS because that's where you're going to pull the data, and that's how you're going to assess what the needs are of the student. So those needs may be programming in the school, it may be the community forum, it can be a wide variety of pieces. And we have some ideas about what that is, but it's not a fluid K-12. I mean, I don't want to say it's not fluid, but it's pretty building specific at this point, so I think the K-12 piece will help maybe bring some of that to light.
What do students get out of having an integrated K-12 MTSS?
They get the supports and services that they need to have them be healthy and well-adjusted students and to have academic and social emotional success.
Consistency is the key, Michael, right? You know, up until we started down this path 4 years ago, the high school was doing its thing, the middle school was doing its thing, the 2 elementary schools were doing, you know, their things, which were all different. And, you know, what Heather's been able to do over these four years, focusing in on this, is first of all generating a common vocabulary. So the vocabularies in the 4 schools were completely different. We now have a common vocabulary. We can have a conversation where a senior high counselor can be talking to an elementary counselor and they're talking the same language. When you're trying to build a program, the most important part is to be able to carry on the same conversation. And, you know, up until about 5 years ago, everybody was vested in what they were doing. They were hanging on to it because they were doing it right. And yet, when we started going down the data analysis piece, what we realized is everybody's heart was in the right place, but their programs were all over the map and quite frankly, not evidence-based. And that was a really difficult conversation with our faculty in terms of they were very vested in what they were doing, but there was no evidence of what they were doing was actually helpful. And that's a piece that Heather has really brought to the forefront and saying, okay, you know, we believe that you believe what you're doing is helpful, but how do we know it works? And then when you ask that question, kind of the emperor had no clothes, and that's why we started going down the different social emotional programs that we put in place. So that's really what the students get, is a consistency. Just like we have math consistency, we have now, we're building a program of social emotional and mental health and wellness consistency.
Right, so, but in the case of math, because that's an easier one to talk about, right?
Yep, and this one is not.
Especially for me, because it's quantitative. The goal isn't to implement a K-12 math program. The goal is better understanding of math concepts when students leave the school system, right? So maybe in this case, these are the right strategies and tactics, but the 5-year outcome really is students are more healthy, students feel more well-adjusted, students have less stress, students have less anxiety.
Yes.
Rather than the program itself.
Yep, I'd agree with that. But going back to your original assessment on all of these is, how do you look at the 5-year window and what is the impact on children?
Yeah.
And that's what, you know, I think that you actually, in the very first part of this process of going down this path, probably had the most, you know, it was the aha moment in the discussion, because, you know, we went right back and we were all kicking ourselves in the butt, quite frankly, that we hadn't thought of that, because that's our job, you know, and so every time we've looked at this now, we've started to look at it from that perspective. So what you're seeing right now is the original documentation, the way it was written, and just as we did in the last one, we'll turn that one into a student outcome. We'll turn this one into a student outcome as well. So.
Other questions about?
I was just going to say, actually, that comment, I thought you hit the nail on the head, to be more proactive and less reactive.
Yes.
I think the goal of where
Yeah.
we're trying to go.
Question, now, if this budget passes next week and you get your additional counselor, is that going to make this work better, more efficiently, or is it contingent on having an additional person?
Better, yeah. I think, the MTSS system itself is not really, it's not dependent on having an extra counselor, but the tasks and the things that we need to do that come out of that will be very much helped by having an additional person to do that, especially when we're thinking about getting into the classrooms and delivering curriculum to be proactive. That's not an option at this point right now, so it'll definitely be very helpful. So
And just one final comment on this before we let it go, and I think Michael, you know, was very, very accurate, and said it's really easy for us to think about math, because everybody thinks about math, they can see how it's linear, they can see how it all connects and so forth. This work is in many ways groundbreaking work, and, you know, to get a K through 12 concept around this is a struggle, and we're very fortunate to have Heather leading this work, because quite frankly, 5 years ago, it was all hit or miss, and we're getting better at hitting and we're missing less. So it's really due to her consistent leadership that we've got this far, and we'll continue to improve. As you said in these strategic plans, each year we grow, we learn, and that year will change as a result of that growth and learning. So I just wanted to make sure that Heather was given the credit she's due.
Thank you. Thank you. I would say, really, my team is kind of, if I didn't have a strong counseling team, I think we wouldn't be able to do that either. So I'd definitely like to give them all the credit too.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Go on. Okay.
Curriculum leadership structure is you, Todd.
Okay. The broad goal is to really to take a look at our curriculum leadership structure over the next 5 years to put in place a structure that supports the curriculum work we need to do. One of the things that over the last 3 years we've done with all curriculum work we've done in the district is we've kind of looked at it with a K-5 focus and then a 6-12 focus, so we're seeing it as two pieces. The reason why we are doing it that way is it allows us to really include the transition from elementary to middle school, and it also includes the transition from middle to high school. So examples of that, we have a K-5 science committee that's been actively working on science, next generation science. We have a K-5 math committee that has been fully implementing our math program over the last 4 years. We've also had great success with pulling middle school, high school people together in world language, as you saw the presentation that came out of the work that they have done. We've also had a lot of success by pulling our math teachers together, middle school and high school, and really taking a look at those needs, looking at the data. And actually, through the support of, I was able, through a title grant, was able to create a position that we have kind of been piloting over the last year for a math curriculum leader position, grades 6 to 12. So I've had a staff member assisting me to help coordinate the efforts between the middle and high school. And that model has worked very well for us. But one of the things that is very clear, when you look at the designated curriculum leadership in the district, there's me, and then there's the 4 building principals, and there's Dr. Morse. And there isn't a lot at the building level that is really responsible for shepherding along some of these curricular efforts. So what it means is we do depend an awful lot on volunteers, and our teachers are wonderful people who step up and do these committees. But one of the things that I have become increasingly aware of, and I think anybody who's been actively engaged in curriculum work in this district, is that we need a more designated structure. At the high school, we have a department head structure, which is a little bit of an archaic structure, but it does give Suzanne a structure to be able to pull people together from all the different curriculum areas and develop initiatives, and then have that work go out to those departments, and then those leaders can then take that work and make things happen. We don't really have that capacity at the middle and the elementary levels, and in order to really bridge the gap from middle to high as well as from elementary to middle, we really need to take a look at that. And so areas that we really need to look at are particularly English language arts, K through 5. It would be great to have, and these are looking at a budget to create a stipended structure to have teacher experts that are responsible for curriculum areas that will assist in the shepherding of this work through. So we need English language arts, we need science, we need social studies. Ellen Irvin already is kind of our math curriculum leader at the 2 elementary schools, and she does a great job with that. But we also need, as more and more STEM issues start to show up, we need somebody with that level of expertise to really be taking a look at the big picture and helping us to assemble those pieces. I believe very strongly that we have this expertise already on our staffs in the district. It's just a matter of identifying who those people are going to be and give them the position and the authority to make it happen. And what that would allow would be to have a district sort of curriculum leadership team that could regularly be meeting and shepherding forward curriculum initiatives. One of the things that happens in a small school system is a lot of times it's the same people over and over and over again who do a lot of the lion's share of the work. And having designated people who are responsible for that will allow us to keep the work moving along and not, like at the elementary grades in particular, one of the things that holds us back is in order to do any curriculum area, you need to engage every single staff member at both buildings to make it happen, because ultimately all of them are going to be impacted by it. So when you make changes to the science curriculum, everybody K through 4 is impacted by that. And so it's hard to keep moving things along when you have to keep going back to the same people over and over again. So as a system, we need that structure. To give you an idea of kind of how Oyster River compares, a lot of school systems do have curriculum directors and positions like that at the building level that help move this along. I mean, Oyster River, I was looking at some of the data on us as a school system, and roughly about 3% of our budget in this district goes to sort of that administrative side of things, and but many school systems, it's as much as 6 or 7%. So we are actually, we don't spend a lot of money in the district on those types of things. And so to be able to build that capacity internal, I think would really allow us to do a lot of great stuff. Because like I said, we have very talented teachers who have the expertise. It's just a matter of creating the structure and the direction so that they can continue to do it. Because if all curriculum work has to go through me, I'm one person, and as much as I might try, I mean, and teachers, they want to meet at 3:15 in the afternoon, and if every committee wants to meet at 3:15 every day, I can't physically be at all those things. So having that structure of people that can really do that work would be really beneficial to the system as large. So, questions?
No, go
Sorry.
ahead. Go ahead. Fine.
In terms of the role, I'm not sure it's a reasonable assumption, but so with curriculum, from what I've experienced over the years, is there's a major investment of time and energy in the researching of what changes to potentially make, and then there's the incredible investment of energy in the rollout, the early phases of new curriculum. In thinking of this role, I would think that those ebbs and flows wouldn't necessarily require a consistent role, or would perhaps that role during periods of greater stability, let's say, would it be more of an evaluation role? How do you see that working?
Well, my philosophy of curriculum is that it should be a continuous process. One of the things that in my career, I've seen many curriculum initiatives where you bring together all the social studies teachers of the district, because that was the subject that I did. You bring them all together in a room, they take all the relevant documents, they create this great binder of standards and all aligned with all the topics. Everybody then says, okay, great, this is what we're going to do. Then they leave the room and they do the same thing that they did before with just maybe a couple of adjustments to accommodate that. And there's no ongoing, like, how's it going? Okay, we have this new curriculum standard. For example, civics. There's a civics requirement at the state level that we need to assess our students for their civic abilities, and we're supposed to be reporting to the state. And so there's an ongoing need to take a look at that and to talk about, okay, well, we've incorporated this. Are we achieving what we have set out to do? And so one of the things I would like to see happen in all subject areas is that it's a continuous process of conversation. Jay Richard does an amazing job with his department structure of really, they meet multiple times a month and they're given very specific directed questions to be able to focus their conversation and to keep continuously going back and looking at the work they're doing. And so I want to move us away from the idea that there's a definitive end. Okay, we've arrived, we've established a curriculum, okay, now we'll sit on it for 10 years. It really needs to be continuous. It needs to be, we're constantly asking questions. I was in a math committee meeting this afternoon, and the focus was on, we've been doing Eureka for 4 years. Okay, what are our results, and what do we need to do better? What professional development do we need to take it to another level? And that's really what I'd love to see every department doing. And I think if it all hinges upon a small number of individuals sort of driving those conversations, it just is that much harder to make it happen.
I'm confused by sustainability, like why, I'm hearing all, the English and all of these different subjects, and I'm like, why is it called sustainability coordinator or STEM sustainability?
Well, one of the things that we, and this actually has come about through conversations with our sustainability coordinators in the district, Maggie and Jackie Bruin. I mean, they very much see the challenges of implementing sustainability curriculum as outsiders and wanting to, and recognizing the need to have an internal mechanism that's making it happen. So having teachers on staff that are the ones that are driving some of the work that's happening. Right now, a lot of the curriculum development around sustainability happens, some of it is with teachers, but a lot of it is Maggie and Jackie pulling resources in and bringing it to the schools and sharing it with teachers, but it's not, it's more challenging for them to network with teachers and to make sure that it's working well if they're not there every day inside the institution. So that's part of it. The other thing is we were looking at the STEM and sustainability. They do very much go hand in hand. I mean, a lot of the look at, solar energy and a lot of the topics regarding responsible environmental practice do go to technology and how we can use it to better things. And so we saw those two topics dovetailing quite well. So that was the thinking.
So I'm still confused about, is this like a stipend?
All of these would be stipended positions. They're internal. There would be, we're talking about a wide range of stipended positions that would be teacher leaders who have a responsibility for a particular content area. Particularly with things like sustainability, there are oftentimes these fairly large-scale initiatives that need somebody to kind of do some of the organizational work to actually get it going and make it happen. And like I said, right now it is Maggie and Jackie, but they both we've met many times, and they question the sustainability of continuing to have it be an external thing and trying to bring it within the staff and make it be part of our curriculum structure, because a lot of the topics in sustainability are science topics, they're technology topics, they're social studies topics, and that's where it needs to be.
So the structure would be very similar to the department head structure, but focusing on K through 12 curriculum as opposed to high school management. So with stipends.
Questions further?
I don't know. I'm still, I guess, I mean, I sort of, it makes sense in a way, but I think because it really makes it sound like you've got these specific, develop a budget and job description for the sustainability coordinator K through 4, and then it's 9 through 12, and then it's position for K through 4 to be shared between Moharriman and Mass Way, but then that can't be those are two different schools. So I'm confused by this, and I'm not real comfortable with it at this point, I think.
I think there's no question we have logistics to work out. I mean, we have made a number of changes in master scheduling to create more common ability for meetings to take place between the two buildings. I think the idea of having it shared between the two elementaries, we were just thinking that it's a logical thing to have K through 4, because all of our meetings and so forth are grade level meetings, to have the two buildings sort of coordinating, and they regularly do that anyway. But you're right, there are logistical, organizational things that have to be sorted out to implement something like this.
So the thing is, when I look at your 1920, so we don't have this, that wasn't included in the budget we just passed, or we haven't passed. It's like,
So this next year, we would spend time looking at it, and we would suggest it.
So again, we won't see actually the stipend things till the fall anyway, which would kind of flush it out, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the whole idea, is to give us, and like I said,
They wouldn't all happen at the same time. We were thinking that, we would stagger the implementation over the 5 years. The major issue that we face, and to be, brutally honest here, is, my content area is art, Todd's is social studies. So when we're talking about math, we don't have the expertise between us to guide a logical progression of math. So we reached out, and we have Ellen Irving, who's a teacher, do that for both buildings. What Todd would like to do is have that same kind of expertise when it comes to language arts, when it comes to science, when it comes to STEM work, so that he would have basically a small group of really committed educators who can help refine and evolve our curriculum and have the kind of conversations our teachers deserve. So Todd goes into a meeting as a social studies teacher and it's a science conversation. He's not the expert in the room. The teachers who are there are the experts in the room. But the teachers in the room aren't coordinating the conversation, they're just having the conversation. So what we feel is to take curriculum to the next level, we want to tag into our teacher leadership. Not take them out of the classroom, but give them a stipend and have them perform leadership functions to keep the conversation evolving and current and make sure that we're asking the right questions. So we did this at the middle school with Aaron, and he did math coordination like Ellen does for grades 5 through 12. And it was a pilot that we tried, and it's been incredibly successful. And the question was, would high school teachers accept a middle school teacher in a math leadership role? And they did. And so that's kind of encouraged us to have this conversation. This model is currently used in Newmarket, and it's a cost-effective model because we're not asking for more administrators. We're asking for support of the administrator that we have so that when we're having content conversations, he has a person that he can rely on to build the structure and follow through in that structure who's an expert. So that's the concept.
I think one thing you might do to sweeten it too for these positions is to have a budget for these people to attend conferences, to be on the on the edge of what's going on. So if it's a math conference or so whether you want to build in some extra money for professional development, so that because you're kind of then saying we really want you to kind of
Yeah, we want you to actually identify these things and recruit your colleagues to also want to participate in the same kinds of things. Absolutely. And the other component is we're looking at, and one of the advantages to having done this with Aaron Ward is that we're also looking at his work schedule. And fortunately, working creatively with Jay, we've been able to set up a schedule so that he is free some periods to come up to the high school, be in high school classrooms, observe colleagues, and build those relationships. Because if you just have somebody who spends their whole day in one building and then for an hour after school once a month you get together, there's not the relationship that's built. So that has to happen too.
Right.
I mean, I look at it in a way, we're extending what we do for extracurriculars, where we have teachers who know soccer or lacrosse, and we do stipends, and they do after school, to developing it with curricular work. And I think to your point, it's not adding an administrator. One question, with the high school system where we have department chairs, subject-specific department chairs, how do you foresee that kind of interaction going on?
Well, I think that's a conversation that Suzanne and I have had quite a bit of, because the department heads in a high school play other roles other than curricular. They're also, they assist in budgeting, and there are other logistical things that they do. So I would hesitate to say that it would make the high school department heads obsolete, but it would change their role, and it might change the stipends that they get. From a curriculum standpoint, it benefits us to have people who are designated as either 6 to 12, K to 5, or K to 12, depending on the subject area, and they have the whole gamut of responsibility for that. So that would be the direction we would go. I don't want to suggest that we would get rid of the high school structure just yet, but it is something we need to talk about, how much of it is curriculum leadership and how much of it is just structural.
Or administrative. And I raised that I didn't want to see any friction develop because of a little bit of a turf.
Yeah, and I think with the Aaron, we've discovered that we can do it without stepping on toes. The department head structure at the high school is a communication and management structure that allows Suzanne to reach out to essentially 100 people in this building And it's really not designed to be a curricular structure. And so this would complement that, not replace it.
I just want to say one more thing. And I don't really have the issue with the stipend for the core subjects. My concern is really around the sustainability/STEM, which in some places is just called a sustainability coordinator. I don't know. That's the piece that makes me uncomfortable, that I would like to see kind of tweaked. And, I'm not convinced that
Okay.
that is appropriately explained here.
Let me go back and take a look at it and see if I can make the language more consistent. I would add that the needs are different based on the structure. So, for example, at a K-5 level, all of the teachers are subject generalists, so they're not necessarily science experts or math experts. So the role that a person plays in a K-5 environment is different than the role they might play in a 6-12 environment. So the roles might be different at different levels depending on the needs of that level. But let me take a look at it, and I'll come back to you with a refined version.
You're going to be coming back, because, again, with proposals, right, for the...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Many times, I'm sure.
Can we move on?
Great. And
I
so,
think the last is the succession plan for district leadership.
and so I've talked a little bit about this concept, and the board talked a little bit about it with me in my evaluation. When my current contract ends, I'll be 1 month short of being 70, which means I'll have been in school for 65 years.
That's old, Jim.
Actually 66, because I stayed back in first grade. So, the reality is, I have to think about, the end of my career, and in thinking about it in advance, it allows the board to have a conversation about transition planning. The absolute best transition planning I have seen in my life actually happened in Barrington, where 2 years before Superintendent Kirshner left, they brought in Dan Mullis, who was brought in specifically to be mentored by her with the idea that he would succeed into the superintendency. And that's exactly what happened. And as a result, Barrington didn't miss a beat as they transitioned in time. And my suggestion to the board is that the board should consider that type of transition plan. When the school system hired me, it was a time of turmoil, and we've had really a great run together, and we've done some really terrific and groundbreaking work together. And I think that the best thing the district could do is position itself for the continuation of that type of focus and work. And so really this is about positioning the system so that my successor would have the benefit of working here for 1 or 2 years and getting a sense of you as a school board, the district, and in order to continue the good work we have been doing. So we come to the end of my contract, we'll be doing the strategic plan work one more time before, I head out the door. What more valuable time to have my replacement in place is when that work is being done, because when that person takes over, it means no hiccup. They'll own the plan that you have just adopted, and you'll go through 5 more years, hopefully, of consistency and growth. And that's really the idea behind this, and I'm certainly open to questions from the board.
I wondered what you meant by internal succession plan. Why internal?
It can be internal or external. I think that the idea is you'd advertise. I know that you'll have internal candidates. I know in this case, you'll have external candidates. I will be honest with you, when I applied, no New Hampshire superintendent was interested in Oyster River at the time because of the political dynamics that were going on. And, as you guys know, the finalists were actually from 3 different states. And I suspect that when Oyster River opens my position, this time, you'll have a lot of traffic, both outside and inside. I know that you'll have internal candidates who are highly qualified, and you'll have external candidates who would love to work for you.
I guess I would take out internal, though, because I think there's the implication that there's a,
Okay.
it's going to, there's not going to be an external search, and we don't know.
No, I think that you need to do an external search, even if you end up with an internal candidate, because that validates your process.
Yeah. I guess I think that looking forward, there's a huge controversy about, there was a buyout of a previous superintendent, and there's a huge controversy about paying two salaries at the same time. And if this is like paying two salaries for 2 years, I think that's something we have to have a discussion on. And I think rather than have, and maybe it's a decision for a future board, frankly, whether they want to have that much transition time. So I'm wondering whether, because if we say this is our plan, then we're kind of committing ourselves to kind of a decision that a future board is going to have to live with and fund. So, I mean, maybe that's the nature of a 5-year plan anyways, but, and whether hiring somebody as an associate superintendent, if you have somebody as a superintendent, in a school system, will they want to come in as an associate superintendent? Is that, is that going to, how would that work? So I guess I have questions just about how this would work. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm not, to put it down as a 5-year plan, I don't think I'm ready to say that. So, I mean, that's just where I am. Maybe people can argue. Whether we're going to make that decision now for like 3 years down the road for a new board, how they're going to do the hiring.
The need for the overlap may depend on who the candidate is, too, which we may not, I mean, that's a tough one because we don't have flexibility at that point in the process to, when you get to the point of making an offer to somebody or selecting the next superintendent. This timeline that's laid out here would have the search happening in the 2021-2022 school year.
Right.
While we're finishing up, hopefully, a new middle school building.
Exactly.
Do we have the organizational capacity to do both of those major efforts at the same time?
Well, the 22 school year, we hope that we'll have opened the school in April. Meaning, given Tom's concern, you could always advertise the year before I leave and provide 1 year of transition. But I mean, I can't emphasize enough how abrupt superintendent transitions typically are and how disruptive they can be if you just go from me to the next person. So, if 2 years is too much, then 1 year, I would argue with my heart and soul, you should absolutely at least give yourself 1 year so that you can have, so that person has a chance to get their feet under them and get, and really get a sense of you as a body, the developing strategic plan that'll be happening during that time. I've watched in my career many school systems go through superintendents, and you feel like you're hiring someone at that point in time who's the cat's meow, and then 2 years later they're leaving because, I mean, this just happened in Manchester. The superintendent they hired in Manchester is leaving with less than 2 years under their belt on a 3-year contract. So, I mean, boards go into this with their best intentions, and they want to hire the absolute best person possible, and these jobs are dynamic and very difficult. And I think that Oyster River at least deserves a year where they can build between one superintendent and the next, and so I would encourage at least that.
So maybe instead of the 22-23 saying new superintendent hired as associate superintendent, maybe it should just say something like continue with succession plan, or, you know what I mean, make it a little bit more
Nuanced.
What's that?
Nuanced.
Yeah, yeah.
or something along the lines.
But I agree with the 5-year outcome in this situation. I definitely, obviously, we have to have a fully implemented succession plan at that point, however that all works. We need to make sure that whatever outcome happens, that it's there by that year.
And you want to give yourself a full year to do
Right.
the advertising, the
Right.
interviewing, the community
Yep.
outreach, all of that. So
Right.
the
Right.
year before you decide you want to bring in a person is really the year that you're setting yourself up to do the work.
Right.
So I think what you're describing in this process is an integration plan, so that you ideally have the candidate selected with a buffer period. Michael, maybe you made the point earlier, I think it does depend a lot on the candidate, right? So if it's someone who has not yet been a superintendent, but we feel, or whatever board feels that person is the right person, maybe it's determined that more of an integration period is needed. But, so in general terms, I think you want to identify that the integration period is what the plan is, and that's defined based on, what the candidate pool is, who the ultimate candidate ends up being, and then, so to Tom's point, to give the future boards that flexibility without being too prescriptive.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is, looking at this, it's like, how do we, I think why we've been successful in a large part is because there's been a lot of stability here. There's not been a lot of turnover.
Right.
So the question is, again, even around the table of us, in a situation where there's a lot of instability, the core stability has been the administration. How do we, through a process, maintain some stability and pass the institutional knowledge of our board? Because we've been here a long time, a lot of us.
Mm-hmm.
How do we pass that along, or how do we transition both administratively, and I think there's going to be a transition that occurs on this board itself, too, as some of us age out of this. So, I think
You got a long way, Al.
Well, again, I'm just trying to think, the nuance of this really is how do we maintain stability and pass the institutional knowledge on, I think.
Yeah.
And I would just want to speak to what Dr. Moore said. There was turmoil, and I think maybe we could say things are going swimmingly now, but there was also some rocky periods when both many of us first came onto the board and when Dr. Morse established, and it took a while for the lay of the land to occur. And I want to also point out, we're not just talking about Dr. Morse, but we're also talking about Sue Caswell, who's been an incredible asset to our district with tremendous knowledge with the budgeting process and how our economics work. And we're looking at a transition of two incredibly important people. And I think, to Al's point, I think we want to do it as smoothly as we can, because I think things are in a good place and we don't want to start to lose that. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Before we completely walk away from the strategic plan for tonight, there's, as we look at, when we go back to look at the whole thing again, on our kind of second walk through it, I think it would be helpful to have kind of a summary of what at least the position and major budgeting impact is. To have a sense of, when we put all this together, how many stipend positions, how many professional positions, how many administrative positions are we talking about adding in each year of this? I don't want to overanalyze things and say, for each initiative or for each tactic, how much is it going to cost, but where there are significant expenditures related to new programs, that those are kind of identified up front. So we have it's not a budget, but it's an idea of what we're kind of signing up for.
No, it's kind of like throwing out how we did it with the facilities thing, just how does it fit together?
Right.
And can we fit it together?
Yeah.
But I agree, because we did that when we dropped the facilities and we're like, oh, this is all going here and this is how much it'll cost. I think it'll give us a better sense of how it fits together, so I think it's think it's a
And
good
how much of it hits in that 2021 year when hopefully you're starting your middle school?
Yeah.
Right, and 21, 22, which is the first year you pay, you actually, because you don't pay on the bond until, it's 21, 22 would be the first year, right? So that's the year that, really
Okay.
needs to be looked at closely.
And even next year when you're asking for the bond.
Yes, that's true, too. Yeah.
We'll do that. So I was thinking in our next meeting that I would create a change sheet as opposed to giving you all of this paper again.
Right, oh, yeah.
And
$135
go through each one.
We don't need all
Identify, like all the academic outcomes in the 5 years have been changed. And we'll make the changes from tonight, and then we'll do this, we'll just do this cost analysis. Okay.
Okay.
And we'll have that for the next meeting with the idea that, do you see yourselves doing a first read and a second read in April, or do you feel like through the workshop process, in the first meeting in April, we can put it up for a vote? Do you feel like you want to go through a first and second read, where you've gone through 2 months of reviewing it?
I guess my sense is this has been a really meaty discussion, and there are going to be a lot of things that will be changing, and it probably merits 2 passes at it, or a look and a...
All right,
and
so
a
we'll do an April first meeting, April second meeting.
And that's just me, so...
No, I agree. First of all, I can't even remember some of the stuff we did before, so I just need a little bit of time to kind of fit it all back together, just to look at it.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Okay, so now we're back to the regular schedule. Approval of the agenda, motion to approve the agenda. Denise?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Moved by Denise, second by Brian. All in favor? The agenda is approved. Public comment, I don't see any public here. Approval of the minutes, could I have a motion to approve the minutes for February 20th? Brian?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Moved by Brian, second by
I'll second.
changes?
I don't think I had any changes.
No changes?
Changes? No changes? Ready to vote? All in favor of the minutes? Please raise your hand. 6 in favor, the student rep in favor. The minutes are approved. Announcements, accommodations, and comments from the district. No?
I have a few announcements that are sports-related. I know Patty has some as well. And I just wanted to start out because I'm sure Patty will speak about the girls' hockey team, but I went to the game last night, and she was fabulous. The girls fought very, very hard against Hanover, and she'll speak a little bit more about it, but I thought you guys played incredibly well.
Thank you.
Noah Strout, it was the state champion in wrestling for Oyster River at the 152-pound weight class. He also came in second in New England and will be competing again in the national championship, so congratulations to him. Grace and Theo Castingay qualified for the Meet of Champions in Nordic skiing. So congratulations to them. And Patty will be talking about some of the other teams. I would also like to let you know about on April 9th, we will be having the in-school SAT day and PSAT day. So the juniors will be taking the SATs and the sophomores will be taking the PSATs. The seniors will be involved with community service activities. It's their day to give back to the community before they graduate. And they'll be doing a variety of things on school grounds and off of school grounds. And our freshmen will be involved with some community building and working with some facilitators from the Brown Center at UNH. So we're very excited for the activities of the 9th. And I'd also like to take this moment to recommend a date for graduation. We need to solidify our location and all of the services that we need, and the project graduation needs to do so as well. So I'd like to recommend that June 7th be the date for graduation. Todd and I have gone over the snow days and the delays, and we feel confident that June 7th will be appropriate.
You know, is that something you'd like a motion on?
Yeah, because it's a calendar issue. We need to lock and load it by you guys.
Okay, somebody make that motion then?
Well, I guess I have a question, though. So how many hours are we up to now? Because I'm like 28 or 20 after this last day, something like that?
Yeah, we've had 3 cancellations, and that's 6 hours for each cancellation. That's 18 hours. We've had 7 delays, so that would be 14 more hours. That's 32 hours that we've lost. The high school calendar is built with 1,056 hours. So even if we didn't make up any hours, we're still at 1,024 total. And I'm assuming that we have 5 snow days built into our calendar, and I'm assuming that the 3 cancellation days that we have, we will likely make up. And obviously, the winter's not over, so there still might be more. But June 7th.
Please don't say that.
June 7th works for the graduation date. It meets all the required standards and puts us in a good spot for that. And also, just so you know, the state standards, 30618 has changed, and they allow more flexibility in establishing graduation dates now. So they used to have more restrictions on that, and now you can set your graduation date without worries for the state coming in and saying you didn't meet the minimum requirements.
So Suzanne, have you coordinated the June 7th date with our sister schools who share the use of the facility at UNH?
So I've spoken with Peter and Dover, and also with Principal Shea at Somersworth. And Somersworth, depending on the day, we may be able to work with Somersworth High School and have them back to back. But again, it depends on the date. They are going through the same process. Dover and Somersworth are going through the same process of picking their graduation dates and going to their school boards. So we're waiting to get that information back.
The 2 principals are making similar recommendations around the date of the 7th.
So Somersworth is making a similar recommendation around that same date, and Dover is a little bit later. It's the following week.
So does Dover know that if they go by themselves, they're going to get nailed for a much bigger rental fee because one of the reasons?
Yes, the Seacoast principals talk quite frequently about it, and we've been in contact with about trying to align those dates as much as possible.
It's going to be at UNH again?
It will be at the Whittemore Center.
Any particular reason?
Yes. A lot of it has to do with our ability to place a tent. So we can't put a tent, well, we could put a tent on the turf field, but that's cost prohibitive. That's beyond what.
Whittemore is air conditioned?
Whittemore is air.
No.
Whittemore is.
It's not air conditioned.
It's cool. It's much cooler than
The gym.
Lundholm.
Yeah.
Lundholm was, So last year we had it at the Whittemore Center. It was much cooler. Heat wasn't an issue. The year before we had it at the gymnasium.
It was
that
awful.
heat was an issue, especially people that were sitting high on the in the stadiums. And that was because at the Whittemore Center they were working on the lights, and that's why we had to relocate.
So using UNHL, it's cost-effective, way less expensive than it used to be when we were doing it outside, like half. And we don't have to worry whether it's raining or not. So that's the big issues.
And we have to put a tent on our grass field, means that we have to make sure that there's a lot of things underneath the grass.
It's a lot of wear.
So there's a lot of irrigation and all kinds of things, and so placing a tent is becoming more and more challenging for us. And weather is also a challenge, and moving people inside. Parking is a challenge. There's a lot of elements to having it here that.
The last time that we had it outside, it was pouring, and the tent didn't hold all the people, and people were outside getting drenched because they want to see their child graduate or their grandchild graduate. So I think it just is turned into a much more convenient location and one that we can predict.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, the last 2 times we did it outside, I was principal here, and both times we ended up having to set up for a graduation in the gym.
Right.
As a backup plan.
Right.
And it meant a lot of overtime for our custodian. It was logistically a very challenging thing.
Right.
So we would.
So, I'm
Go ahead,
sorry.
go ahead.
So are we looking at still like a 6 o'clock?
Yep, it would be the same.
Okay.
The evening of the 7th.
Because I know one of the issues at UNH is if you park before 6, then you have to pay for the you have to pay for parking before
I
6
think they
o'clock.
changed the time to 8, so it wouldn't matter anyway.
So
Well,
people
we-
can't,
That's something that we
They'll
need to
work
work
with
on
us.
with them, and that's part of that's part of ensuring that the services that are there that we need, and that
Okay.
includes parking.
okay.
So I'm sorry, did we get a motion to?
No.
Not yet.
Could I have a motion to make June 7th the graduation date? Brian?
Motion to make June 7th graduation date for the high school.
By Brian, second by Al. Other questions? Ready to vote? All in favor, raise your hand. 7 in favor, the student rep in favor. You got a graduation date.
Thank you very much.
One more, I have a question for
Okay.
Susie. I'm just, and I know Heather's gone now, but just wondered how class selection for fall, how that whole process went and how that's going as far as numbers, and I don't know how much, but just in general, how things are going.
All of the kids have gone in and registered for their classes. We're now going through for next year's sophomores, juniors, and seniors. The counselors are going through individual conferences with all of the students on their caseloads to go through what they've registered for, to look and to have conversations about their 4-year planning. And then once that process is all done, then we'll start running numbers.
Okay.
So we haven't done the numbers yet, and we won't until the counselors go through that process, because things will shift and change.
Right, okay.
Thank you,
Okay, so-
Suzanne.
Thank you.
Other comments from the district? From the board?
I got a couple. Okay, so first of all, this, Kristen Frasilius handed this to me this morning, which is the Human Library. It's kind of interesting since we had a thing talking about diversity. So the Human Library project, and lo and behold, we're actually one of the sponsors of the Human Library, along with UNH, Community Church of Durham, Freedom Cafe, and Oyster River Women Aid. So what you do is there's from 1 to 4, I believe it is, in 30-minute blocks, you can reserve a time to sit down with somebody. The idea is somebody who's very different from you, and so I actually went in and registered today. You go to their site, which is NewHampshireLibraryNH.org, and it allows you to preview the human books. And they range from, generational, talking to somebody older about younger thing, to transgender, to military, to religious, to like a former addict. I actually signed up my first one to talk to a Muslim about their religion, and then my second one to talk to a transgender woman. So you sit down and you get to hear their story. There's a lot of openings for it, just that was my pitch. I told people today I don't think anybody actually watches the school board meetings, so I'm not sure what kind of impact this will have, but that's a pretty interesting one. And then the second one is Saturday, the 10th, from 4 to 6 at the Community Church of Durham. There's a bunch of actually Oyster River High School students that are part of it, and they're leading a local climate change action forum, and they're going to have a bunch of other people from New Hampshire talking about it, and from UNH, so I think that's kind of an interesting one. And then there's one that the next meeting, I'll probably have more on it, since, again, we were talking about diversity training. Kristen came this morning and was talking about safe zone training for LGBT, and it's really trying to work with some of the stores and business owners in Durham so that their place of business is welcoming and accommodating to a diverse group. And so they're probably going to run 2 one-hour training sessions. The first one is going to be March 27th. I don't have the time right now. I think it's probably at 9 o'clock in the morning. They first started talking about having it at the Town of Durham Town Hall, and I begged them not to make me come to any more town hall meetings than I have to. So I think it's going to be at the Community Church of Durham, but the next meeting that we have, I'll have probably more solid timing on that.
I just want to mention that Jeremy Renner, who was a graduate of Oyster River High School, and Matt Renner, son of Susie Renner, a graduate of Oyster River High School, was the executive director of Free Solo, the movie, the documentary that won the Academy Award. And if any of you haven't seen it, you got to see it. It's about the ascent of El Capitan, the guy Free Solo, without any ropes. And it's terrifying, even though you know he's going to make it safely. It's terrifying to watch. It must have been terrifying to film because they're right on the cliff. So highly recommend it. Anybody else? Okay. Assistant Superintendent?
You've heard from me a lot tonight, so I will be quick. I did just want to mention, in your goals for 18-19, you had a report on the literacy work that we're doing. The committee is not ready to do a report, but we are continuing to make progress, and we will be back to give you a more comprehensive report. The Literacy Committee is a K-5 group made up of teachers from the 2 elementary schools and the middle school, looking at creating a curriculum framework around all the main areas of literacy curriculum. We've already done informational text, literature, speaking and listening, and the next one, which is probably going to be the most controversial, is to look at the writing section. So that's really where we really want to spend some time on. So we will be ready to make a report at some point this spring, but I just wanted to let you know, I'm aware that tonight was the night, but we weren't ready for that. So, but great work is happening. The other thing I wanted to quickly mention in your backup, I included a booklet that New Hampshire Listens shared with our staffs as they were doing all the dialogues. It's a fantastic handbook of, how to, it's basically speaking out at school, and it really is a very practical guide for when a certain situation comes up, how do you interact, and to answer those things. That guide was shared with all of our staff in the district as a way to kind of give them something to refer to, because that has been the biggest thing that staff have come away with is, give me some practical, I understand the idea of wanting to be more aware and all of that, but give me practical stuff that I can use right away when these situations come up, and this is an example of that kind of thing. So take a look at it. Thanks. Oh, and by the way, I do want to mention Matt Renner winning the Oscar. I attribute his 7th grade social studies teacher is the person who really inspired him to that accomplishment. And if you look in the yearbook for the 1997 Oyster Middle School yearbook, you notice that his middle school social studies teacher was I. So.
Todd, if you watch the Academy Awards, he mentioned you and gave that shout out.
Superintendent's report?
So in your packet, you have our first bit of public data that we're sharing tomorrow night. And so for this first one, we basically picked up the vision statement and the major areas that we're trying to address. And over the coming months, we thought we would customize these to the different major headings. One could be on sustainability, one could be on academics, one could be on safety, one could be on wellness. And so tomorrow night, it's a more generic one, and I love the stock they used. I think it's a nice stock, and each of them, of course, will evolve, because what we have on this particular card is the concept, not the actual drawing. As we go into the spring, summer, and fall, we'll actually be able to replace the concept with definitive drawing that we're heading toward in terms of design.
Question, is this also going to be the same one used at the Mohammed on the Saturday pancake breakfast day as well? Or?
Yeah, so we've been talking about the pancake breakfast, and we think the pancake breakfast might be a better place to do a booth-type arrangement rather than a presentation, because of the hundreds of people who will be going through. So in the process of talking to David about a similar event like we're doing at Massway in the evening, where we can have a conversation with whoever comes. And Jay is setting up an event this spring, and we think the ideal time to do that is before, and I need to talk to Andrea Von Owen, but an hour before her spring concert, which is a middle school, high school concert, so there's lots of people who come to her string concert in the spring, and have another spaghetti supper type thing and a presentation before people go to the concert. So we'll capture that audience. And so as of tomorrow night, what we're going to do is Jay, Todd, Bill, and myself will each take a piece we've done a slight variation of the PowerPoint that we used in deliberative session. We'll talk to the major issues. What we're hoping is that we'll talk maybe 20, 25 minutes and give the community members 20, 25 minutes to ask questions. So that's kind of how we've arranged it. One of the nice things that happened tonight is Brian said, where it's in Lee, he'd be glad to host it, introduce the crew, talk about how we got to the place we are now, and then we can go into the meat of the conversation. So I will tell you that I'm kind of excited because Denise actually Monday did what Michael usually does, which is send me an email saying, hey, it might be time to send out a reminder on this meeting, because Michael usually does that for me. But Denise jumped the gun, and Michael didn't get a chance to do it. You did. And it actually turned out great, because by sending it out as a reminder, we literally doubled the attendance in one day. So it went from 30 adults to 60 adults plus like 30 kids. So Carrie's providing childcare. So it should be a pretty decent audience. I mean, that's a really good audience to get out in an evening for us. And so I'm pretty excited by the attendance, and I'm hoping it goes well, and whatever we learn from this first presentation, we'll incorporate in the next one, and so forth and so on over the coming months. So this is sort of our inaugural presentation on the middle school.
So I'm going to make a suggestion, because one of your things is sustainability, so I want you to kind of begin to think about moving away from paper, if at all humanly possible. And actually, I have...
Paper is sustainable.
Yeah. It's not when it's waxed like this. At any rate, I've had a bunch of experience after doing freshman orientation, U-Day, and Parents Weekend at UNH. And what is a really effective mechanism, especially anybody who has a phone, is to make a QR code and have the because when they point their camera at the QR code, it'll take them automatically to the page, and then you can have that lead them to a spread out segment. So I think thinking about a simplified website design that you want to have this set up on. I mean, if you want to work with me, I can host it initially just so you work on your design. But that, I think you should move to that mechanism. It's very simple. Again, this thing will get lost in your car pretty quickly, or when you put it like me in your massive piles of paper and it's missing. But the phone thing will give them access to come back in, and you can have a much cooler setup. So that's my suggestion.
Love it.
But-
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I would say, and I don't disagree, but we're also reaching out to our whole community, and not everyone is tech savvy like me.
No, but again.
And so we need, variety.
It gives you
I agree with
an
variety.
alternate mechanism to do it, and it also then begins to move away, because again, remember the sustainability part was on there. You want to begin to think of something that moves away from paper, if at all possible.
I think you need to use a mix, because I've never used a QR code. I would not know how to use a QR code.
Well,
And I'm not the only person in Durham that
No,
doesn't know
you're
how to use
not,
one.
and it's like, it was pretty hilarious, because it wasn't, to move away from your stereotype. I had students at U-Day who had no idea that their phone actually, just by pointing it, would do a QR code, and we were there and say, hey, just take your so when you're going to have your booth, you have the QR code, you just need somebody who can say, hey, take your camera and point it. And it really is very, very effective, but it allows you to do, the reason I'm saying it is because you're doing the back end digitally on a website, it gives you so much more flexibility than this card or the paper.
Yeah.
You can tailor it to your presentation, and it gives you a lot of flexibility to change it as the presentation times go forward. So my 2 cents.
Other questions related to tomorrow night? Thank you, Al. Going back to the diversity issue, the commissioner contacted me and asked if I would be willing to sit on the governor's task force related to diversity, and I told him I would be honored to do that. So that's something that'll happen. And then annually related to the teacher's contract, I'm directed through the contract to ask if the board would be willing to provide a retirement incentive for staff. We had 13 people who have expressed interest in retiring. I am not recommending that we do a retirement incentive for 13 people, but I think it does serve us to maybe do 2 or 3, just because that makes it easier for us related to our budget for next year. We have incredible staff on this list. They basically put themselves on the list annually, because the contract says if they do it by, I think it's October 15th, Sue, is that right? October 15th, something like that. Then, and they do retire, they get to get bought out on their sick time. So 2 of the 13 are retiring. They're very, actually junior on this list. So I would ask the board to consider offering a retirement incentive for 2 or 3 staff members this year. And the way the contract language works is they have to be retirement age. For my generation, that's 60. For junior teachers, it's 66. And they have to have served in the district for at least 15 years. So
And the money,
open that up to the
the
board.
stipend that they would get comes out of this year's budget then, right?
yeah, we would try to.
Would there be money for?
Yeah. So thoughts by the board?
Of those people on the list, how many of them would actually qualify for
These,
that?
all of these people but one would qualify, actually. They have the 15 years of service, and they are age eligible.
So how do we determine?
Age eligible.
Well, that's just showing an intent, that's not showing they're actually.
That's right. So what I would do is I would base it on seniority. So I would put a notice out to the staff saying that if anybody is interested in retiring and they're age eligible, I'll pull out the contract language. And if the board authorizes it, then I would go down through the list based on their seniority in the district.
And if one person decided, well, I'm going to go another year, then they'll go the next person on the list?
Yep.
or-
Yep, that's exactly how I would do it. So, thoughts of the board?
When was the last time we did a retirement incentive? Was it 2 years ago?
3 years ago, we did a massive one, where we had like 14 people retire. I haven't been too keen on doing that kind of retirement incentive. I really want to wait. My logic in waiting for another big one is going back to the conversation we had earlier around the middle school and the bonding, fitting it into a time when it really benefits the district to lower our personnel cost in order to absorb some of the bonding. So that's why I'm not saying I want to do this for 13 people. I think a couple people is fine.
What do you what number are you, is like 5?
3.
6, 3?
3?
So do you need a motion to?
I do, and then I'll put the notice out tomorrow. I need your authorization.
Can I get a motion?
So are we, is it the same as it's been in the past? The
Yep.
20
Yep, it's all built into the contract now. So when we negotiated the guild contract the last time, we had put in the process and the amount.
So can I in just envisioning how to explain this, should somebody ask, what's the function of this motion?
So, I'm looking down at a teacher right now who's at the tippity top of the scale, probably making 82.
Okay.
And this person would be replaced based on our past efforts, probably with somebody who would cost us 55.
Okay. Okay.
And so the district lowers its personnel costs, puts a piece of that into the buyout, but then ultimately, year over year, it'll take a while for that person to get to, the new person to get to the top. So there's a savings over a number of years. But eventually, over 15 years, it balances out. But in the initial years, it's a savings to the district.
I guess I'm a little bit hesitant to set an expectation that this will happen frequently, or.
Well, I have to ask every year because that's part of the contract language. You guys have the authority to say no. That's also clear in the contract. So it's totally up to you. We didn't do it last year. So
We haven't done it.
We haven't done a big one since the 3 years ago.
We did do it 2 years ago, though, we did.
Can I ask a loaded question? So I guess the question I'm asking is, like, would they retire anyway? I mean,
No.
the three that we're doing, are they of such seniority and such age that they would that we don't really need the retirement incentive, they would retire anyway, or is this just
Nope.
tip pushing them over?
These people have put themselves on the list. Even when we did the big one, they were on the list. So the idea is, if we do a small one, maybe we can draw some of these 13 people from, I'm thinking about it, to, I'll do it. So no, of this list, 2 people have already said they're retiring. They wouldn't get the incentive because they're very junior people on the list anyway.
Okay.
So there's no point in offering a retirement incentive to somebody who's expressed that they're going to retire.
Yeah, no, that's right.
You're trying to pull some of the people who are senior, who have been thinking about it literally for years, to commit.
So your recommendation is 2 or 3, or?
Yeah, I would say no more than 3.
Okay. So are we ready to vote on that, or?
We have to
Well,
make a motion. All right, I'll make a motion to approve a retirement incentive of up to 3 individuals.
Moved by Al. I'll second it.
Did we establish a dollar amount?
It's in the contract, it's
The contract
$20,000.
amount, Okay.
Can I just ask one question? I mean, so you have a list of people. Spelled out in the contract, too, that the list of people is used to inform the board's decision in going forward?
No. No, I'm just using this as an example of people who have expressed interest. Tomorrow, what I would do is let the whole faculty know that the board, if you do this tonight, is authorized up to 3 people. Right. And some of these people may say, I'm interested, but there may be somebody who didn't put their name in October who's very senior, who's interested. So it's open to the entire faculty.
Right, and so I guess maybe I didn't phrase it, and I might not be able to verbalize it, but in the way that you explained it, is that there were people who you thought were going to definitely retire by hook or by crook. But they weren't at that top of the list.
Correct.
And therefore, if the people at the top of the list accept it, the people who are going to retire aren't going to get it.
That's correct.
Is it fair for us to have that
Well,
knowledge when we make our decision? Is that?
Well, you don't have the knowledge, I do.
But you shared it with us.
I didn't give you any of these names.
No, we don't know, but we don't know the names, but we know, but in a way that.
So the fairness issue is, remember that the whole, yeah.
Did you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Ken, remember the whole issue here is, in order for this to work, it has to be a win for the district and a win for the employee.
Right, so that's why I was hoping it was spelled out in the contract, that the process we have just gone through of hearing what you explained to us is permitted. Okay.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
I just didn't want to
Yeah,
avoid.
and in fact, when I met with Guild leadership on this, we realized that when we opened the contract again this spring for the next 3 years, that we saw a hole that we needed to fill together. And so, this process has worked well, but we wanted to make sure it was crystal clear. For example, the issue of what does age eligible mean? So the state says you can fully retire age 60, Todd's generation, but Todd could have chosen to retire at 56. Is he age eligible? Yeah, with a penalty. But our intent was, when we wrote the language, it would be somebody who is fully age eligible, not partially. And that came a result because when we did this the very first time in my first year, we actually had a person who could retire but wasn't fully age eligible, and we didn't have that clarifying language. And after that, we always had that clarifying language. So we noticed when we were looking at this that we wanted to make sure we defined age eligible.
So we're not doing insider trading.
Exactly.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
So I have a motion by Al. Is there a second?
You second.
You said.
Do we have a second? Getting late. Further questions for Dr. Morse?
If you post this tomorrow, how long do they have to?
I think 2 weeks. That's what I was thinking, Michael. 2 weeks is plenty of time. If somebody's been thinking about it for a while, I can't imagine they haven't talked to their financial advisor or they haven't discussed it with the state at this point. I can't imagine that anybody on this list hasn't done that because I've seen these names for multiple years now.
Ready? All those in favor, please raise your hand. 5 in favor. All those opposed? Abstentions? 1. Did you not vote?
I voted yes.
Yes, okay, I'm
So
sorry.
6, 1
6 and
abstain.
abstention.
Thank you.
Others?
No, that's it for me.
Business administrator? Student senate?
All right. I haven't been here in a while, so I've got quite a few things to say. First of all, the one-act play is this Friday. It's called Hey Boss. It's at 7 p.m. in the auditorium. I'm friends with a couple people that are in it, and they say that it's really funny and a really good show to watch, so I urge you all to go. As Ms. Philippone had alluded to, I've got a bunch of sports updates. So the winter season is wrapping up right now. Different sports are at different stages, so like some playoff schedules are done, some playoff schedules are just starting, some sports don't have playoffs. As Ms. Philippone said, we have a couple of skiers that are going really far in their state, regional iterations, and we sent a lot of skiers to the state races. The swim team did very well. The girls placed 3rd and the boys placed 4th. The girls basketball team made it into the playoffs, but they lost in their preliminary round, but they didn't make it into the playoffs last year, so they were really excited to make it in. The boys basketball team is doing very well. They're going into their playoffs seeded 1st, so they have a bye for the preliminary round. So their quarterfinal game is this Saturday at 7 o'clock, and it's home because they are the top seed.
This Saturday.
Let's see. The boys hockey team made it into playoffs but lost in their preliminary round. And the girls ice hockey team made it to semifinals. Our semifinal game was yesterday. We ended up losing to Hanover 2-0, which was sad. But we went into the playoffs seeded 1st, and our coach said that he's been coaching the team since it has been here, and he said that he has never had a team go into the playoffs seeded 1st. So that was really exciting.
Very cool. Congratulations, Patty.
Thank you.
Patty, is that co-op working well?
Yes, we would absolutely not be where we are today if we didn't have the co-op. It's quite possible that we wouldn't even have a team if we didn't have the co-op. We have a team of 18 players right now, and although that sounds like plenty, a lot of the girls that are playing, they're only in their 1st, 2nd, 3rd year of actually playing hockey. And so that in its own right is very valuable because with the co-op, you're getting more people interested in the sport. There are girls that didn't even know that could be an option, and then when the Portsmouth co-op opened up, they were like, hey, we have a hockey team now. That's pretty cool. Maybe I'll try it out. So we're getting more and more traction for the sport. Right now, there's only one division of girls ice hockey, and it's only varsity. So and almost every team is a co-op. If it's not 2 teams, if it's not 2 schools, then some of them are 3 or 4.
Really?
Yeah, which is kind of crazy. But it's kind of needed. But I think it's really good to have the co-op because it sort of raises that awareness, because then those girls will say to their kids, yeah, I played hockey in high school, maybe you want to try it out, whatever. So it's not just the girls playing now, it has really, really long-term effects.
How many Portsmouth students are on the team, Patty?
Mr. Allen asked me that right before, and I could not give you an exact number.
It's probably a good sign, actually.
Yeah, our coach was saying to us that he has no idea who's from Oyster River and who's from Portsmouth.
Very cool.
So it's been working really, really
That's great.
Great, great. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's see, what else? As Ms. Philippon said, Noah Strout went very far in wrestling. Let's see what else I missed. I think that's all for sports. Very important, very on people's minds right now, is we're just coming out of February break, as you know. That means that this is one of the longest stretches between vacations that we see, which can be hard on the students, but also on the teachers, because the students get more difficult to deal with. So that's just sort of something to look forward to, I guess.
Or snow days.
Or not.
Or not.
Well, the good thing is that the days are getting longer and
It's
going to
true.
get warmer.
It's
So
true.
it makes you a little more optimistic.
Yeah, during the winter, I would come to school while the sun was rising and go home while it was setting, and that wasn't very nice, but yeah. All right. Spring sports are also beginning. They aren't in full swing yet, but people are starting to, get back into the swing of their spring sports. The Lit Mag the literary magazine has had a huge overhaul this year. They're now the creative arts magazine. They don't want to be tied down into just writing, basically. So they're welcoming, really trying to welcome all sorts of art and that kind of thing. They've named themselves the Pearl, kind of going with the oyster theme, like mouth of the river, that kind of thing. And they had a really successful fundraiser for Valentine's Day. They made a basket full of goodies with Miss Horsley made mugs. They put all sorts of candy and movie tickets in, and a lot of people brought raffle tickets. They were really pleased with the outcome of that. The person who won bought 20 raffle tickets. Wow.
So Patty, have they published their Pearl yet?
No, they haven't yet. They did. They also had another fundraiser in December. They had a contest for a piece that went in, and the winner got a $25 gift card to Dunkin' Donuts or something like that. So they're really trying to get the word out, because in the past it hasn't really been prevalent in the school, but they're trying to really get it out there. And, yeah, it's pretty cool. The Senate is also having a huge overhaul right now. We've been having trouble with attendance and people not really doing what they need to. So right now, I want to give credit to Jackie Carter. She's really pushing for all of this. And we're establishing bylaws. We're looking at other schools. It's really going in a great direction. And she's a senior, and she so wants to get it done before she leaves. She can leave it behind and not have to worry about it. And she's doing a really great job. And lastly, as Ms. Philippon said, April 9th is PSAT, SAT day. And I just wanted to talk about what the seniors are doing. So they do a community service day. But what's pretty cool is that the school they have things that we can do, but they don't necessarily prescribe things that we have to do. So different advisories can reach out to different people, or try to do their own thing, or work with a couple other advisories. So what mine did is we had one person reach out for beach cleanup. We had one person reach out to an old folks home, and I reached out to the elementary schools. And we're going to go and transplant bulbs at Moharriman for the renovation. So
Nice.
It's pretty exciting that we can kind of plan what we want to do if we have that initiative. So yeah, that's all I've got for you.
Very cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything. So I think we'll take a break now, and I would like to just suggest that we postpone the board self-evaluation. I think it's not appropriate to do it this late at night, and then to do the rest of the business. That's because unless there's a huge write-in at the election, I think we'll have an intact board. So Kenny and I are quaking in our shoes, but we kind of think we might be back. And so I think we could postpone either a meeting or two, and it'll still be appropriate. So let's take a 5-minute break.
Sounds good.
to speak up.
Yeah. She obviously had a certain level of comfort with us.
Yeah, yeah. Her brothers had, been kind of trouble.
Oh, is that right?
Okay, let's get through this.
Got to do the gun thing. Do we have another public or?
Nope.
No, non-public
No.
tonight, okay.
As soon as we get
Okay.
through guns and maternities and
Okay, let's get back together. God, I forgot that I seconded that motion. That's pretty. Wait a second, yeah, it was you.
I love it.
Okay. Okay, the last meeting, Dan and I were authorized to create a letter to the School Boards Association requesting they reconsider, to rescind their approval of House Bill 564. That has been sent. I haven't gotten any acknowledgement, any response. I sent it yesterday. So we'll wait and see if they take any action, but, so that's been done. The other thing we were authorized to do was to create a draft of an op-ed that we would send to state newspapers urging passage of 564. And you have that. I hope you've had a chance to look at that. And since I'm sending, the idea is to send it as a group, I need to make sure, and Dan and I need to make sure that it's acceptable. There's nothing in here that people feel uncomfortable with, they think inappropriate. And again, it's a draft. We can, change it depending on what you say. So, Denise?
It was very well written. Thank you, both of you. And the only thing is on the very last, it's the last paragraph. The very first sentence, unfortunately, support for HB 564, blah, blah, blah. It sounds a little too, political or partisan or whatever, so I would prefer to take that sentence right out and just start that paragraph with, as elected members of a public school board.
I think that might make it more positive.
Yes.
And so I'm totally fine with that.
So if we do that, we should probably also eliminate, regardless of their political party affiliation.
I think that could stay in, though.
You think?
Yeah, because, you're saying that this is broadly, it's a kind of a softer way of saying that.
Okay.
I don't,
The only thing I would change is at the last one, you have it signed you.
Yeah.
As long as we all vote and agree on it, it should be the Oyster River School Board, because it's we want this to have, no offense, have the weight of the full board behind it.
Okay.
So just asking for a reaction, one of my concerns is always sort of creating unintentionally a side issue. The description of angry parents, it makes me a little uncomfortable in that some parents who may not see the point of this or agree with this necessarily might turn it into,
Sorry, I missed.
So in the paragraph where it's sort of offering scenarios for the danger of having guns in schools, schools can be open to angry parents with deep grievances. I'm not entirely sure
Okay.
that's
Because I know
a
you
road
took
we
that
wanna
out,
go
yeah.
down.
Well, yeah, especially.
Take out the angry, I guess.
Well, if you're going to take that, they're open to the stable and the unstable.
It's conjecture, it's,
I'm fine with the whole thing, actually, but.
So what would you start it
so,
with then?
well,
Or would you take that whole paragraph right out?
so so this is a combination of a version that I wrote and that I rewrote that Tom had written, and I have a version of this that I sort of have in mind, but I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately. I don't know. I guess I was just looking for reaction to that. I could be talked off.
I think what I could do, I think we have enough arguments in it without that. I think it's, so I think I think it's, but if you have gun possession in schools can be profoundly intimidating for teachers, to me, that might be, if just cut out the first part of it. And then it's also upending school routines. It kind of flows into that idea. So I think if you take that out, because it's kind of like two different ideas in that paragraph, so I think we got plenty without that. So I'd be willing to take that whole thing out.
I mean, I think and maybe it's because I said it before, but it's like, but to me, the bigger issue is the upending routine and the interfering with first responders are those, it's not conjecture, and it doesn't really put any judgment about your stability or your anger or anything else. It's just a matter of fact, how we respond.
Yeah. So what if we just made that paragraph that gun possession in schools can be profoundly, because I think it's intimidating to teachers, it's also upsetting to students, that it kind of flows better that way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
We had also talked about citing best practice, ideally, on some sort of a national level.
And we haven't had a chance to talk.
I don't, so.
I think we're okay here, because it's almost common sense that,
Well,
maybe not
I don't think we should assume that.
From our perspective.
From our perspective, I think we agree on that, but we're sharing this publicly, and there's a lot of disagreement.
I mean, the reason I like it the way it is now is because when we start to talk about best practice, we're going to go down the slippery slope. I mean, what's best practice in Durham may not be the best practice in like Pittsfield or something like that. So the argument itself is rational and stands on its own right now without it complicating it.
Okay.
Can I make a suggestion, Tom?
Sure.
It's not unusual for the council to send something over our way for us to review and possibly adopt. It's not unusual for Lee or Madbury to do the same thing. I'm wondering if we shouldn't send it over to the council and select boards to see if they wanted to sign on or do a
I just
version
wonder
of
in
it
terms of
themselves.
timing, to get,
Yeah.
because when would they get, and then would they want, I guess I'd rather not do that.
Okay.
Because I think, I'm not sure, because if we send it out, when's it going to get in the paper? And it's kind of being discussed right now, so I think there's a time issue.
Can you, when you're talking about papers and all that, I know there were certain other districts that were kind of on our same wavelength. Can we just make sure that they get a copy of this as well?
Yeah. I can do that. So with cutting out, like Denise is cutting out that, unfortunately, that sentence.
That sentence,
I think
right.
that's fine. I think to cut out the whole section, schools can be open to angry parents, and just have gun possession in schools can be profoundly intimidating for teachers, just have that paragraph. And then there was there something, other change? Those are the two that.
We were also going to eliminate just imagine a teacher conference with an angry parent.
Oh, we're going to take that all that?
I don't, maybe I'm wrong.
I thought that's what you said.
I thought we're taking that whole paragraph
The whole
out.
paragraph
The
out.
whole paragraph?
Yeah.
I would take the whole paragraph out.
Okay.
Okay. That's fine with me. I think the idea of, you take a gun into school, somebody sees you with that gun, nobody knows who you are.
Right.
I think that's almost,
Yeah, that emergency situation.
It's, in theory, that should trigger an emergency response immediately.
you would want it to.
You'd want it to.
You'd want it so that and I think, the people that just think they should be allowed to have guns don't realize what it would trigger if you were not recognized as a person, somebody legitimately there. So.
I think it was especially poignant pointing out the discrepancy between we're getting funding to harden our schools.
Right.
And here you're opening the front door to guns. And to point out it's illogical. And, which way do you want to go? I thought that was very powerful to cite that.
Mm-hmm. So you
Need a motion to support it?
I'll go ahead and, I'll make a motion to adopt the letter with the changes that we discussed, and we're sending this to,
What I thought it'd go to all the major, I don't have the list of all the papers, but I mean, it would certainly be, Union Leader, Foster's, Portsmouth Herald, Concord Monitor, Keene Sentinel. I would see probably eight or nine bigger papers in the state,
Yep.
something like that.
so, to the major papers in the state.
Moved by Denise, second by Al. All in favor? 7 in favor, thank you so much. So I'll see that it gets out. And it'll be signed by,
The ORCSD, the school board.
yeah, by the board, the entire board. Okay, great, thank you for that. And if I hear any more from the School Boards Association, I'll let you know what happens with that. Okay, we need a motion to approve the Oyster River Middle School maternity leave of absence. Do you have a motion there, Brian?
Motion to approve ORMS maternity leave of absence.
Moved by Brian, is there a second?
I'll second.
Denise, discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. 7 in favor, that's approved.
Oh, the list of
So we have
policies.
policies.
Oh, goodness, they're usually listed, they're not, so now I have to look at them. Let's
Denise.
see.
Denise?
Oh, you have them right there. Awesome. Okay, thank you. I will make a motion to approve a policy JICD, student discipline and due process, policy, D policy to be determined, allowable use of funds and adherence to uniform grant guidance, and also D policy to be determined, federal cash management for first read.
Okay, that's approved as a block for first read. Is there a second? Second by Al. With questions about these? Hearing none. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, these 3 policies are approved for first read. School committee updates?
I've got 2 things. One, I was away the last meeting where Todd Allen presented the sabbatical committee, and I just wanted to say how impressed I was with the members of the sabbatical committee and the professionalism and the diligence that went into doing the work and coming up with those recommendations. And we'll be meeting again tomorrow to kind of discuss what we went through as the process to try to refine our model. And perhaps it might even come back to the policy committee to kind of rewrite our policy regarding sabbaticals if we feel that there's a way that we could make that process work even better. So just wanted to mention that. Manifest committee met and no problems. And I would like to put on an agenda, again, I know we've discussed it before, but I found the 6 months of doing the manifest to be an incredibly ineffective use of time, as well as an ineffective way of looking at the spending from the school district. There would be numerous $21.67 expenses, and stacked in there then would be a substantial one. And in conversations that Alice had, and we had them with Jim and with Sue, thinking that maybe we should have a threshold and only things that are above the threshold come. It never precludes anyone, whether you're on the manifest committee or not, from going and looking at manifests. That's your purview, you're right. But if we're designating people, I think we should do it in a way that's meaningful, productive, efficient, and so maybe if we could put that on an agenda to bring up and discuss once again.
I mean, I agree, because what's strange about it is you tend to lose the biggies in the minutia. And it's like, so, I mean, I can't remember what the health trust is, but it's like $300,000 or something like that, and you're like, and so, again, I think if you raised it to the threshold, you're probably more likely to ask questions about the big things, what is this? And instead of like, oh, wow, they did $21 for like oranges or something.
Okay, we'll put that on the agenda.
Tom, also, I think we forgot to delete a policy. It's supposed to be on there.
Oops,
I'm sorry.
That's right.
missed one.
So, back up. So Denise, you want to make a motion to?
Oh,
to delete?
policy J.
IJ. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll motion to approve policy IJ for
No,
deletion.
Delete.
To delete.
Yep.
Okay, moved by Denise, second by Brian. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, that policy's
Good
deleted.
catch.
So the new, so Kenny, I'd be happy to put that on, and questions like, in terms of the work of sorting those out, is that, how much work would that be to sort out?
Yeah, probably more work.
Yeah. But we can talk about that.
You're going to bring that here, you're going to put that on policy?
No, I think
I
that,
think it's a board.
It's a
decision.
board-
Come here, yeah.
I think it's definitely.
yeah. I think I probably won't put it on, because we're going to have a lot of stuff
Next meeting.
next couple meetings, so, but I will
It's
get
not
it.
an emergency, particularly since Kenny and I are not on the
Yeah.
manifest.
Yeah. So Denise, Denise and Dan are the new team, okay? So do we need a motion
Think for
to
yourself, Al.
nominate the,
No, I think you appointed.
I just appoint those, okay. Denise and Dan are the new team. So that's, anything else from committees? Public comment? Closing actions? Everybody get out and vote. I'm going to be at the polling places. I got my sign with, poll with Kenny's and my sign on it, so we'll be there. I'll be there for sure. Kenny has to work. Next regular meeting will be on the 20th. It'll be the first meeting of the new board. So, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Right. Moved by Al, second by Brian. All in favor? Okay, we're adjourned.